Tom, thought we would start today with what we asked as our second question of the day. Real quick, I don't want to spend too long on this. Jagmeet Singh, Versace bag, is this a story or not?
Well, it is to a certain extent, but I also think that he deserves to be given a break. I don't know what the story behind the Versace bag is, but I do know that he was already beaten up roundly a few weeks ago because a photo reappeared that he had done sometime in the past, but he had given permission to use it again. A very stylish guy, very, very good dresser, and always, especially when he was a young bachelor in Toronto and a young lawyer, he was out and about. And he said he didn't just have one Rolex, he had two, and he posed for and on behalf of one of the fanciest shopping centers in Toronto, wearing one of his Rolexes. It was an entirely black and white photo with a shining gold Rolex. So, he likes that sort of stuff. I don't think it hurts him long term. I think that people like mocking that a little bit, the old story of the champagne socialists. But I think the Jagmeet, in every literal sense in this case, wears it well, and he's going to be able to smile his way through it.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So it doesn't hurt his brand.
I don't think so, because he already had the Rolex.
Yeah.
We already knew about that, right?
Brand has always been about being very stylish and very natty dresser.
Yeah, kind of like Pierre Poilievre. Right. All right. So
let's talk about
but not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Really not. Let's talk about your article in your piece in the Gazette today that Legault won't be out-Angloed. What do you mean by that, Tom?
Well, if you watch his behavior since losing that by-election only last month in Quebec City, Jean Talon riding was a solid Liberal riding. My friend and colleague Margaret Delisle held it for years. It was such a good Liberal riding in the Quebec City area. They even held on to it when the PQ would win. So for the Liberals to have slid to last place was one bit of the news, but this was a CAQ riding. They had won it in the 2018 campaign. They had retaken it in 2022. They had gotten on the wrong side of the young woman who had won there. I now work with her in the media. And she said, okay, I'm quitting. And that left him with a by-election. And they got crushed by the Parti Québécois. So Legault has been totally erratic ever since. He had announced that he had canceled the third link in Quebec City. He brought it back. But it was clear that he had told a bold-faced lie to the people in Quebec City about what his real intentions were, and he got caught on that. And then he started going after the Anglos. It's basic Quebec politics. In case of doubt, attack the Anglos. So there was a large part of that in the institutions that were being attacked by the creation of this new central agency in health. We were going to lose a lot of that. But then he went full bore and started to bear down on the English universities, unprovoked, out of nowhere, based, by the way, this is the most important part as far as I'm concerned. All of the staff work, all of the so-called facts, all of the analysis was completely bogus. It was just completely wrong. The amount of money involved was wrong. How they were going to help the French universities with these increases was complete malarkey. None of it made any sense. And McGill and Concordia held their fire as much as possible, sat down with Legault and his hapless minister, Pascal Derry, and said, look, here are the real numbers. You're going to be doing incredible harm to Montreal, to our economy, and to these universities. Is this really what your game plan is for Quebec? Legault said that he wanted to see their overall numbers reduced by 25%. When I spoke with Derry, she said something very similar. They were complaining about the amount of English being heard in the streets. Point blank, that's racist. I'm sorry. You complain that you hear a language in the street that's different. That's racist. And so Legault met with the universities, much to his credit, once this thing blew up, sat down with them, and they had a very interesting proposal. They said, look, give us a freeze on the timing of this thing. Look at what we're willing to do. We're going to put millions of dollars on the table. We're going to boost the training in the French language for our students coming in from other provinces or other countries. You should give that a look. And, by the way, we'll look at the international side of this thing at the same time. This was mostly about students from the rest of Canada. To give you an example, they were going to put the tuition at $17,000 for students from the rest of Canada. That's more than twice the tuition in arts or sciences at the University of British Columbia and University of Toronto, which are two of the best universities in the country. So we were going to have double the tuition. You're never going to be able to recruit. So what they're looking at now is a report from Moody's that looks at, gives investors advice, saying that they've put both Concordia and McGill on watch because of Legault's position. Over the weekend, we learned that Concordia's finances are already in dire straits. So how are they supposed to absorb this? So if Legault's intent was to hurt the English-speaking community, to try to boost his credibility with the ethnic nationalists who seem to be leaving his CAC and going back to the PQ, then maybe he's succeeded. But I don't even think that that's going to work. If you want the real ethnic nationalists, you're not going to go with some sort of fake soft drink from the grocery store. You're going to go with real Coke, and the real Coke is the Parti Québécois. And Legault is going to wind up losing any hope that he had of ever building up any credibility in the business community outside Quebec, and of course with the English-speaking community of Quebec, which is really hard-pressed right now.
So, Tom, with respect to that story, now you have Moody's weighing in, right? Credit rating agencies suggesting that if this actually happens, things will go from bad to worse. You mentioned Concordia already being in trouble. Does this have any kind of effect on the government? Because I think you would say that you would expect, or we're expecting a decision at some point this week from Legault?
Yes, so we're expecting tomorrow's cabinet day. Wednesdays are cabinet meetings, and I've been told that it could be as early as tomorrow's meeting. Why I'm not mentioning bishops is that I'm also being told on background that it looks like bishops might be given a bit of a special deal here. Well, simply because, first of all, they would have had to put the key in the door. And second of all, they're far enough away from Montreal that this grave threat to the French language, which is supposed to be, the very existence of people who speak English, that doesn't really apply in Sherbrooke and in Lennoxville. By the way, there was a book published within the past couple of weeks by, a couple of dozen of the top real experts, as opposed to Legault, who knows nothing about it, and his minister in charge of language, who knows nothing about it. They looked at all of this and said, really? French in danger in Quebec? The answer is, no, it's not. And they've run all the numbers, and they're just saying that this is completely bogus, which is actually welcome news to those of us who follow these details, because it's something I've seen before in my career. When they were trying to say, we need the Quebec clause for accessing school instead of the Canada clause, they pleaded that Bill 101 had not affected the English community and that this was desperately needed. Once you ran those numbers in front of a judge with the so-called experts being cross-examined, guess what? The whole thing fell apart like a house of cards. So the Quebec government is playing a dangerous game. It's trying to raise up its popularity by attacking a minority, in this case, the English-speaking community of Quebec. And I don't think it's going to work. To your question, Aaron, is Legault actually going to do something in cabinet tomorrow? The universities are not expecting great things. Maybe this is a standard operating procedure for Legault. He'll try to say something. I'll take their money, and for them, they've admitted that there's a problem. They're going to start training people in French. We'll see how that goes, but I'm sticking with my whole plan. What's going to happen, by the way, is that Concordia and McGill, which are very attractive universities, are going to start attracting Francophone CJAD students who can no longer go to English CJAD. And then there's going to be another row, because they're going to say, we're going to have to start applying Bill 101 in the universities like we do in the CJAPs, which would mean the government telling adults what language they can choose to study in, which is completely bonkers, but this is Quebec.
Look, I need to ask one other thing, because I'm trying to understand this story. We were talking earlier on about Sonia Lebel and the fact that, the government is kind of, I don't know, it's talking out of both sides of its mouth at the same time while nothing is getting done. And then the story today, what was it?
The Quebec Liberals are calling for Sonia Lebel to step down, and we know Legault's not great with female ministers.
So what do you think, Tom, based on what we've seen, which is nothing in terms of how negotiations are going? Is she done here?
Well, it hasn't been going well, and there's no question about that. And people are frustrated. But the person calling the shots, let's not get ourselves, is not Sonia Lebel, it's François Legault. They had a game plan. You go into these things with an elaborate game plan. They had one, but it's falling apart. And they've been totally outplayed by the unions because the public remains steadfastly in favor of the demands of the nurses and the teachers to try to get somewhere close to the Canadian average in terms of what they should be getting paid. And Legault emptied out the cupboard, sent out $500 checks that he had promised to win his last election. And then he's done a bunch of things that have just weakened the financial position of the government of Quebec. And now he's looking around at the union and the nurses and the teachers and saying, I haven't left, the pantry's empty. There's not even an empty box of Rice Krispies in there. I can't do anything to help you. And they're not having it. And so Legault knows he's got a bit of a cushion, that he can come up with more money. Yeah. He says that in return he wants more flexibility. The unions will not have any problem giving that sort of flexibility if Legault ponies up the cash. But so far, it's just been a dialogue of the death.
Yeah, I'm only wondering, because I think Jimmy brought it up, right? Eric Girard, who suddenly said he's canceled a meeting with Gary Bettman because he needs to concentrate on exactly what's not happening with negotiations. So it would seem an easy out for François Legault to simply say, well, instead of Sonia Lebel, I'm going to have my finance minister get involved. Is that likely?
The one of those two that I think stands to be fired the fastest is Eric Girard.
No way.
And he has totally embarrassed Legault. And on background, I've been told by more than one person who works with people close to the CAC and with the CAC saying Legault is so fed up with Eric Girard.
Oh.
And if you look at the job that he didn't do at finance or with the Kings, and if you look at the job that he didn't do as the spokesperson for the CAC government with the English-speaking community of Quebec, maybe Legault's got a point. So I would, if anything, I would see if one of those two is going to be in to walk the plank, it would be him, not her.
We shall see. Going to be an interesting week. Tom, thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Tom.
Appreciate
Take good care.
it.